going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review, and this is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And we have finally made it. It feels like forever, but we have finally made it. We are here for the final Innistrad Crimson Vow story that we are reviewing, this being the final main story, Episode 5, Till Death Do Us Part, by, as all of these have been, K. Arsenault Rivera. My quick review at the top of this one is, it is important for you to read this story for you to understand where we are going in the future with most, if not all, of these planeswalkers that we are seeing in these stories. Otherwise, I really disliked it. So, you know, it's important for you to read it. But if you have any other methods, I guess maybe watching this video of finding out how this story goes, then do that instead. Because, wow, I disliked this a lot.
Yeah, I have to say, I also very much disliked it. But I don't think it's that important to read.
Okay. Well, I just mean,
I think the things that it tells you that are like, that are things that would make it that important are things you kind of already knew. I didn't think it was a big reveal.
All I'm talking about is needing to know where these planeswalkers are going next and giving you context for where they just were. That's what I always care about when we leave a plane. It's like, okay, what stakes are following to the next time we see these people? That's all. So, like, the next time we see Teferi and he has the Moonsilver Key, and we need to know why, well, this story gives you context for it, at least a bit. Like, so it's those necessary beats that you have to at least see to understand where we're going the next time we see them. That's all I'm referring to when I say that. But regardless, those are our quick reviews at the top. If you are still interested in reading this story for yourself, we still want to remove as many barriers as possible for you to help you do so. And so the top link in the description down below will take you to that story so that you can read it for yourself, especially if you want to read it before listening to our review. And so, you know, feel free to go do that. And then, of course, we would love it if you would come back here and join us and join in the discussion, whether you've read this story or not, down in the comments below. That's what it is for. Also, before we get on to the full review itself, thank you so much for being here on this channel. We really appreciate you joining us. Please do not forget to subscribe and ring that bell while you are here. If you like the things that we do, there's also that like button. That helps immensely. And sharing this with other folks that you may think enjoy our stuff, also super helpful. And we appreciate any and all support that you're all willing to give in that way. We also have other channels linked down in the description box below. That's Video Games for All and Gluten Free for All. So if any of those sound interesting to you, check those out. And last but not least, we are live on stream on this channel every Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Mondays we play MTG Arena, and Fridays we play assorted video games, whatever we happen to be playing at the time. For now, we are working our way through X-Men Legends. So this Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, tune in for that as well. So, moving on from that and on to the full review itself. I should have known from the start, or we should have known from the start. The story starts with Adeline, and you kind of made a reference to it. I was thinking something similar, but you kind of voiced it a little bit better than I could have. But you were weirded out by some of the things that Adeline was saying, where she was talking about, like, a Cathar's life and the things that a Cathar learns and how they're brought up. And
it was brainwashy, kind of.
Yeah, she mentioned, like, you know, we were told it was this and this and this, but it doesn't seem so cheery now. And it's like, okay.
It didn't sound that way when you just said it, I'll tell you that.
So you thought it sounded brainwashy, and maybe that's what we were attempting to, maybe that's what was attempting to be put forth, was that, you know, the lines that the Cathars have been fed are not necessarily the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? To me, what it read, and I was looking at it, I think I came into this story, I want to say this up front, and people can tell me if they've thought similarly to the way that I felt, or felt similar to the way that I felt, because maybe that'll help me out. I feel like I was very cynical with this story. Like, very cynical.
Okay.
And so maybe I'm just coming into it like, you know, I woke up on the wrong side of the bed today or something. And if people feel like there's like a bias there, I want to know, because...
Yeah, maybe if you were in a very different mood when you read it, you took it a different way than either one of us did.
Well, and you know, I'd like to point out, I don't think I'm in a bad mood. You know, like, I don't think I came into this in a bad mood or anything like that, but... You know, well,
the mood of the story is going to be slightly different in your mind depending on your mood.
Sure. Yeah, and so that's why, you know, we always want people's opinions, whether they compare, contrast, or somewhere in the middle to ours. But this one, I'm kind of asking for a little bit of help, because I feel like I'm missing something here. Like, I really disliked this story in a lot of different parts, and even in some parts where I disliked it where you felt that you enjoyed it. And we'll get to those, obviously.
I mean, I had a similar feeling about disliking it and about, like, wanting some feedback on it.
Okay.
But for a different way. Like, I was very confused for a lot of this, and I'll let you get into it.
Yeah, so, I mean, we talked about the Adeline thing. My cynicism told me, you know, it seemed like it was odd for her to be speaking in that way, but at the same time, it's almost like when this character has been relegated to the woman who's flirting with Chandra to make us feel better about how shit they've been with Chandra, if that's all she has been since maybe story 2 or 1, like, when she was introduced, we got a little bit of information on her. Since then, she's been the woman that Chandra's been flirting with. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so I'm sitting here reading these parts and I'm like, this feels wrong for her. And then I'm like, oh, of course it does. Because we have no context for who she is.
Right.
None whatsoever. It's just like, you know, oh, hey, you're cute. That's it. That's all she's been. And now they're actually giving her a chance to be the center of attention for 5 minutes. And we're sitting here going, this is weird. Why is this so weird?
Yeah.
It's weird because she's only been the arm candy, the eye candy, you know, whatever. Like, and that's not me trying to be insulting to her character.
Right.
It's me commenting on how the story has been treating her.
Yeah.
They haven't given her
that's
time.
The story or the authors or the people directing the authors what to do.
Yep.
The character hasn't been given a character to be.
Yeah. I wrote she was given no other character progression since at least episode 2, if not episode 1.
She was just the, you still like us because we're giving Chandra a girlfriend, right?
Chandra likes ladies, guys, we promise. This is how she likes ladies now. Okay. And we'll get to how that, I predicted it at the beginning, and I arguably wasn't wrong, but I said it to Amy at one point where, towards the beginning of the story, where I was like, they're just gonna, like, not resolve this at all at the end either, are they? Like, they're not gonna give these two any form of resolution of, like, what are they gonna say to each other about Chandra having to leave? Is she gonna stay? Is she gonna whatever? Like, how is this gonna work? Well, we still don't know. So, sure, I guess that was very frustrating. Then we get to a part that I feel like you have a lot more to say on than I do, and yet I feel like I had a lot to say.
Okay.
Soren. We get to Soren's section. And Soren kind of brings up, like, you know, he's wallowing in his own self-pity, literally and figuratively, where he's, like, floating among all this blood, and he's battered and hurt and bruised and cut and bleeding and not dying, but hurt badly after a long, large fall. And he's kind of feeling sorry for himself. And he's like, look at me. I had to unmake Avacyn, and that made me sad. And I can't fix that wound in my heart, or to my heart. And it's like, okay, I get it. You're, you know, earlier on in these stories, right, to, I guess, even further put forth the fact that I'm trying to point out any biases, or at least what's the word? I love using the word. Hypocrisies, that's the word. Any hypocrisies. Earlier stories, I have been the one out of the two of us to say, you know what? I buy it. You're trying to tell me that Soren is different, he's changed, I buy it. This one, I don't buy it as much. And again, did I wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Again, I don't think so. I feel like I was having a pretty good day before reading this story. But he's like complaining about having to unmake Avacyn. Yes, that greatly upset him and it like destroyed him mentally and emotionally. Makes perfect sense. But then he talks about Nahiri. And I knew that it was going to upset you as soon as I read it, because if you're new to this channel, Amy loves Nahiri, and I enjoy Nahiri. I have no issues with her. But I think, especially with Zendikar Rising, the current story team is looking at Nahiri and going, ooh, we can have a female villain that's not Liliana anymore. Because we don't want Liliana to be a villain. She's great, and we can put her big boobs on cards again. Yeah, she's redeemed. Yeah,
she's redeemed because she has big boobs, I guess.
Yep, and so
she was in love with Gideon. No, she wasn't.
And she was in love with Jace and didn't treat him badly at all, or at least feels very bad about how badly she treated him.
No, she doesn't.
And so now it seems like Nahiri is their primary female villain. Even though Nahiri's bad actions from the last Innistrad block, because whether we want to talk about it or not, this trip to Innistrad is definitely a block. In Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, even though they don't do blocks anymore, this is a block. And they don't do
promise.
Right. And they didn't do blocks anymore, but we also went to Ravnica for 3 sets in a row. Right. But they're not blocks, guys. We don't do blocks anymore.
Yep.
But here's 2 sets on Innistrad. But our last trip to Innistrad, Shadows over Innistrad and Eldritch Moon, they had Nahiri acting badly. But the reason is because she was betrayed by Soren. Or she felt betrayed by Soren. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder.
No, she was betrayed by Soren.
Right, but I'm saying, I don't know if you wanted to take more of this than I don't want to steal it.
When you're done, I'll talk about it.
All right. But Soren now says here that the girl that betrayed me, the girl that locked me in a stone wall and made me watch my plane get destroyed. And it's like, you did the same thing to her, and she just did it back to you because you betrayed her.
You're an asshole.
Yeah. And yet he's sitting here on the ground wallowing in self-pity and going, oh, woe is me. My grandpa's mean to me, and the girl locked me in a... First of all, calls her a girl, which is like... There's a lot to unpack there as well. Okay, Grandpa. Calling her a girl is super condescending.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think it's a grandpa thing. I think it's a I am so much better than you kind of thing.
Right. This is, I'm just going to disrespect you in this way.
Right.
Well, it worked,
Yep. He sure did.
Mission accomplished. But it was like that, you're just rewriting, you're retconning with Soren sitting in a hole and feeling bad for himself. That's how I read it. It was like, you know that she wasn't like that, right? Although I said to Amy it's problematic because Zendikar Rising just painted her in that light of like, no, she's terrible, so...
I mean, it didn't. I don't think it did. It...
Tried to, maybe?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it did.
All right, go ahead, sorry.
I think it told the truth. I think it told a harsh truth. You know, she wanted things to go back to the way that they were. And she deserved that after everything that she had been through.
Sure.
It's just that the world didn't deserve that.
Well...
Because the world had become something new. And it deserved to be what it was. As opposed to what she wanted to go back in time and make it, you know? Mm-hmm. And I understand both of those viewpoints perfectly well.
It's very interesting. You made a point, and I think now may be the time to bring it up after I bring up this next point. But still talking about Soren, he just goes after Edgar like the last story didn't happen.
Yeah.
In the last story, or maybe even 2 stories ago, not 2 weeks ago for us, but like episode 3 or 4, and now we're in episode 5. He flat out knows that his grandfather Edgar is being manipulated. He says it. He acknowledges it. He's being manipulated by Olivia. Sorry, what was that?
I just said it's so annoying.
And yet, in this story, he's just like, my grandfather is seeking power and he's terrible.
He's doing this to me. No.
It's like, dude, you know this. You know that he's not. And like,
Yeah, it's stupid.
yeah. Like,
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so do you're still waiting for me to finish?
Yeah.
The only other thing I wrote down about it is like, is it like, are we trying to show toxic masculinity? Like, is Soren just not able to acknowledge his own failings, or it's just like, well, I feel bad and so it's your fault. I'm not going to show emotion, right? So I'm not sad that I had to unmake Avacyn. It's Nahiri's fault that I had to unmake Avacyn. And I'm not sad that my plane was being destroyed by Emrakul. Nahiri made me have to watch that happen. So that's her fault too. And I'm not sad that Olivia is manipulating my grandfather and there's nothing I can do about it. It's my grandfather's fault. Mm-hmm. Or I'm not willing to acknowledge that my grandfather abused me. This will be Amy's conversation. But I'm not willing to acknowledge that he abused me. And so I'm just going to be mad at him for going along with Olivia, even though he had no control over that whatsoever. Because he's being manipulated to do it. And I know that that's the case.
Right.
So is it, like, that's what I'm saying. Is it supposed to be toxic masculinity? Because if it is, I feel like it's not being done well. Like, it's not being shown well in that way. And if it's not, then what is it? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. So a lot in this story so far, I mean, we're very short. We haven't covered a lot of the story so far. And I'm just angry and confused. Right. Like, so what's happening here? So yes, Amy, I would love for you to try to help us cover any or all of this stuff here.
So I was super fucking confused because I was like, wait a minute. He's saying a bunch of stuff here that it doesn't make sense for him to be saying based on the information that he knew in the stories, 2 stories previous to this. And I was like, okay, is it just that the author wrote the final story first, and then didn't go back and double check that the continuity still lined up after they were done writing story 4? Which
blew my mind when you said that, because it's definitely plausible,
right?
It makes sense that and obviously we have no inside information here.
Right.
We never do, unless we say otherwise. But like, we don't know this, but you brought it up and it was like, that's definitely a possibility, right? The way that this is written is like, it's like you know these things and you're acting like you don't know these things. And yet, if it's something that you learned in story 3 or episode 3, you know it in episode 4 and you acknowledge it. But now come episode 5, it's just gone. Yeah, it's just not there at all.
Mind. Yeah, and I only had 2 other theories on what that could possibly be. Mm-hmm. And my second theory was, is it just that he's mad enough at these situations that even though he knows the truth, he's sitting there in like a place of blaming these other people for these things, mm-hmm. because he's just so mad about it. And he can, in his mind, sit there and blame them because there's no one to say, hey, wait a minute, guy, like, you know that's not really what happened, right?
Yeah, like, let's point this out to you, friend. Like...
Right. And that might just be, like, his way of, like, dealing with the fact that he's already come to terms with this stuff. And then in the moment where he's, like, about to attack his grandfather, he's, like, you know, slipping into that blame game. The thing with that theory is I don't think they explained it at all.
Mm-hmm.
What if they were trying to accomplish that? They didn't. They needed to take you from point A to point B. You needed that in between space so that you could understand why he said these things in the last story and why he's saying these things now. You know, take us through the mental journey that he's having so that we know what the hell is going on.
Yep. And
if that's not the case, the third theory is the most outlandish theory, and it's the one really that makes the most sense, which is that I don't know, that he has split personalities and one personality knows this stuff and one doesn't. Which, you know, he was traumatized multiple times and has been through a whole hell of a lot. So that is a plausible thing. But again, you have to explain that. If that's the goal of what you're talking about here, you need to say that. You need to help us get there so we understand. Because it was just a confusing mess.
Yeah, and again, as I've said for many of these stories, and unfortunately, unless, and I'm not advocating necessarily for this, but unless things change in some meaningful way, I'm going to continue to say it this way. Until we return to this plane, likely none of these questions will be answered again. So I can't look at any of these stories and say to myself, well, the next time we're back on Innistrad, we'll find out what's going to happen with Soren, and we just have to wait. Like, no.
That's not going to happen.
Because the next time we come back to Innistrad, who the hell knows what type of story team is going to exist, or if it will be any of the same people, all of the same people, none of the same people, no story at all. Like, will they be back to novels? Will it be just comic books? Will it be short stories on the website? Will it be no stories and just on the cards? We have no knowledge whatsoever, and at this point, we can't rely on that in any meaningful way, because look at any of these stories previous to now and how these have progressed over the many years that we've been doing this show. Mm-hmm. And so Soren ends this story with allowing people into his home, right? Some of the injured into his home in Markov Manor, because he's got the best medical texts there, which I thought was kind of cute in relating it back to what he was talking about in like either the first or second story when they all being like the Gatewatching company meet him in Markov Manor, and he's like bragging about the books and talking about like, well, nobody's got a better library than me, and so how could it be possible? And so, but that's the excuse that he's giving, but really he's being a big old softy, and so he's letting people into his house because he feels bad. But like,
I don't know. I think that this story was really weird when it talked about Soren, because I feel like the characterization for him was weird. It wasn't wrong, because I feel like I felt like we were right back to the way that he was characterized before they started any of these stories. And I know you disagree with that, because you were like, all this self-pity, like, no, that's the Soren we know now. Or it's just a whole new one. Mm-hmm. But to me, it was the blaming and the just like being sort of an apathetic asshole a little bit. It was all back. Mm-hmm. And then like, I was like, I wonder if that's just because he's here with his family that he doesn't like, in a very frustrating situation that he has no control over, Like, is he just, like, regressing? You know?
Sure.
And then once this is all over, he can go back to, like, being the better self that he is. But I don't know, it's so hard to have any of these theories feel like more than just abstract theories. You can't make any actual conclusions because they don't tell you anything.
Yeah. And so herein lies the problem with I always do this to myself, and I hate it. But sorry, future me who's editing this video. If you click up there, you'll see that the last story for the Eldritch Moon stories, we also didn't like at all. And why? Because they had to wrap up so many things and crammed it all into one little, and it was like, yeah, it's fine, right? Just put it out quick. And we read it and we were like, first of all, this story is like 1,000,000 years long. It takes forever to read. This one did not have that problem, right? It was a reasonable length, in my opinion, and comparable in length to all of the other stories from this set, which I greatly appreciated in comparison to the Eldritch Moon story. That was great. Nicely done. But there are so many questions. And in my opinion, again, we've talked about this a lot, in my opinion, they are not questions that are like, well, you just have to stay tuned and you'll find out soon.
Right, because it's not like we're going back to Innistrad like right after Kamigawa. Like, we're going back to Innistrad probably like 10 years from now. And all of the little nuances and details and theories that we've come up with for all of this, like, all of that's going to be washed away by the time we actually get to it.
And let me say, right?
And I'm just talking just time. I mean, you were mentioning all those other things before. You know, the story team changing and this and that. But, like, just the amount of time that we'll have to wait to come back to this plane could do it on its own.
Yeah.
Even if everything else stayed the same.
Well, I'd like to imagine, right? I mean, God, I am not alone in this, but I truly wish that I could see what War of the Spark was supposed to be if the story team that wrote so many stories leading up to it had actually been able to write what they wanted to. And so, while with these stories that we've been reading recently, all of them that have had even the faintest thread of Phyrexian influence in any capacity, I'm looking forward, or at least I'd like to be able to look forward to that eventual culmination and that finale, because that should be a pretty impactful story, as long as the story team is allowed to write the story that they want to write. It will be very different because they are leading up to this big confrontation, but they're bringing in random individual authors to do each chapter of it, right? Whereas it was a whole team for the War of the Spark saga, and then right at the end, that whole team got shit-canned, and hey, by the way, let's bring in new people to do War of the Spark. Oh, what do you mean it sucked? Oh, that's a damn shame. Oh well, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? It was only the culmination of years and years of hard work and amazing storytelling. So, don't worry about it. No one's going to be upset. Please note my sarcasm.
It's like making me almost gag.
Anyway, this is a lot, so we should probably get back to this and stop getting caught in tangents.
We can't change the past.
I apologize. So, okay. There was a line that I wrote down, or either I wrote it down for you, or you asked me to write it down, I don't recall. Okay. But Soren, oh yeah, it was a little bit of both. Soren, on his way to the ballroom, coming up from the pit that he was in, and seeking Edgar, It occurs to him that he has family in that ballroom. And it occurs to him, distantly, like a whisper through padded cloth, that he no longer cares. And to a degree, I thought to myself, okay, there's a moment of like, there's an abuse history there, and a healthy conclusion to come to is, hey, you don't owe these people anything.
Right.
And so it's okay to come to that conclusion that, hey, you know what? I don't give a shit anymore.
Right.
I don't care about you people. I don't have to care about you people. I think he takes it to an extreme with Edgar, and we talked about that already, right? Where it's just like, well, I don't care that he's being manipulated. He sucks, and I'm going to kill him. And it's like, wow. Okay. You don't have to weigh in on that if you don't want to. I wrote that line down because it meant something to me in that moment, and then I figured I'd give you the opportunity to say something if you felt like you needed to. But
it's, yeah. I mean, killing abusers doesn't fix them, and it doesn't fix you.
Well, I was going to say, it actually ruins you, arguably.
Exactly.
Yeah, it makes it a lot worse.
It makes your situation worse.
Yep.
And they're just gone.
Yeah.
At that point. So they don't have a way of getting better. And neither do you.
Yeah.
Because you've squandered it by becoming a murderer.
Right.
So yeah, that's not the way to fix things. But
I mean, it wouldn't make Soren a murderer, right? Soren's killed many people in his thousands of years of life. But I get what you mean, right? I'm not saying you're wrong in that way. It's just it's slightly different, slightly, because it's like, you know, for
I'm comparing it to a real world
I was going to say to most people in the real world, right? Bringing yourself to the point of killing your abuser or hurting them in some way would almost certainly be you being pushed to that level for the first time, and it would be a massive change for you in your life. Whereas for Soren, it's just, you know, it's slightly different. He's a protagonist or a character in a fantasy story, so he's got powers and kills people. But
regardless,
exactly. No, and that's perfectly fair.
But for him, it's a really huge step to decide that he doesn't care when it comes to his family, right?
Mm-hmm.
His life was so long and so determined by what his family did.
As we learned even more so, if not fully, even more so in these string of 5 stories. Yes.
One of the ways in which I can relate to him. So I absolutely get the whole, my family's in there, but you know what? I don't care. I gotta do what I gotta do.
Yeah. And he did, arguably. I wrote down this as well. I thought it was interesting. I mean, again, going through this like Soren and Edgar situation, there was emphasis placed, and it was not lost on me, that Soren saw Edgar as decrepit. He did not see him any longer as beatific, and mentioned that he used to see him as beatific, and now look at him now. And did he always look that decrepit? He's seeing him in a new light. He's able to perceive him in a different way.
But they didn't explain that enough either. Because at first I thought it was Olivia's control that made him look that way. Like, oh, her, like, weird, like, influence that she has on him is, like, making him, like, grossly zombie-ish.
Well, because I thought it was, I mean, if I remember correctly, the story said something to the effect of, like, he was very strong. This was the best he'd looked in a while, and he was very adept with a sword. And yet, did he always look that decrepit? You know, he didn't look beatific anymore. So, to me, what that meant was Soren's kind of aggrandized image of his grandfather had been shattered. Because he had finally come to the realization of, like, wait a minute, this dude's been abusing me ever since that moment and just, you know, he made me what I am today, and I've loved him. That was in the story too. I've still loved him for thousands of years, but it's okay for me to not do that. Like he kind of sucks for that.
Deserve it.
Yeah, he sucks for what he did to me, and like he's finally realizing that it's, you know what, it's okay to acknowledge that he sucks for that.
Yeah.
The dude's not okay.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense and is really great and poignant and perfect. Unfortunately, I didn't feel like they said that. I didn't feel like that was conveyed strongly enough. So when he was talking about that, I was like, oh, okay, so this like curse or hex or whatever that she has on him is like making him really strong and like able to fight really well, but it's like making his body look really crappy because he's just like being controlled by her, and it's just like, you know, this gross spell that he's under.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't, like, the complexity of that didn't really occur to me the way that it absolutely should have, because that explains some of the behavior, some of the dialogue. It makes it more full circle.
Yeah.
When I'm talking about feeling like he's regressed, and that kind of makes it come back around to where we started,
And
or to fixing that regression.
And maybe, so let's talk, I want to talk about Teferi and Soren, but I guess based on what you were just saying, I want to talk for a moment about Arlen's very long speech to Catilda. I did not like it at all. I just did not. And again, wrong side of the bed? I don't think so, but I understand what the speech was trying to do. It was trying to show, hey, guess what? She had a complicated situation with Tovalar. It's not great. It was not a great situation, and yet he came to save her, and he came to help because she called and asked for help, and now her pack is back with her, but I had problems with that too. But her pack is back with her, and so she is trying to come to terms with the fact that he's not a good guy. He's not great. And yet, he doesn't deserve to die necessarily. And so, because Soren is not the type of character to summarize his feelings like that, Arlen did it for both of them.
Right.
Which, I guess, right, Soren kept his grandfather alive to fight another day, or live another day, or whatever. He forgave him, pseudo, kind of, and let him fly off and do his thing with his love now, Olivia. Whatever. And Arlen talked for so long to summarize all of this stuff, and I just felt like it went on forever. I felt like it was like 3 paragraphs too long. Like, it was just a lot.
Exactly what you're saying. It was a summary, and that's not, like, that's not good writing.
That's tell not show, I suppose.
We were in it with Soren, and yet they didn't explain what was happening until later, when we were with a different character, and she basically just said it as though she was a narrator instead of an actual character. Yeah,
because she told it to Catilda, but it wasn't a conversation. Like, Catilda asked her a question, and she just talked for a half hour after that one question from Catilda.
It was a monologue.
Yeah, it definitely was. And I was just bored. I was like, this sucks. I'm so, like...
That's just poor writing. If these concepts that you're trying to convey have any bit of if they're going to have any bit of resonance, then you need to give them, you need to support them. You need to give them value. And that's not what they did here. It's not what they did in the stories where I was just sitting there going, this is just a freaking, there's nothing of substance here. They didn't give any stock to any of these important values that they typically hit in these stories. They're just sitting there going, well, okay, it's a horror movie, so let's do horror movie tropes, and then not explain why it's relevant, because it's not relevant. And so here, it was like they were really trying to do something great with it, but they just didn't do any of the great things that would have made it great. All they did was skirted around it and then expositioned it.
So here's, as an example, we wrote down a quote, or you asked me to write down a quote, a section from that very long monologue-y speech.
Yeah.
And this is, don't forget, this is supposed to be Arlen talking to Catilda, who is at that point a spirit, but then somehow joins back with her body. Don't ask me how. If it's an Innistrad thing and you want to explain it to me, definitely do so in the comments, because I don't get it.
I'm sure it's just a convenience thing, because that's what they apparently are doing.
Don't ask me, man.
These stories.
But anyway, Arlen talking to Catilda says, "You asked what justice looks like here. Tell you the truth? I'm not sure. How do you punish someone who lives their whole life in fear and anger without stoking those flames? I want him to pay for what he's done, but I want him to get better, too. I want him to see that there is another way, that we can work together toward a better day." So again, like I said, it just seemed very ham-fisted, because, yes, this is talking about Tovalar, but it just says him over and over again, right? So, and I don't think she mentions his name once in the whole speech, because, again, it's like, oh, this could be Soren too, and it's like, is that really what we're supposed to be getting out of this? Because,
well, Edgar.
Well, sorry, this
it could be Soren.
Could be Soren saying this about Edgar, right? But either way, you're right. Thank you. But yes, this could be talking about Tovalar or Edgar. This could be being said by Arlen or Soren. Like, okay, is that the big conclusion that we're supposed to come to? Because anyone that's been paying even the slightest bit of attention came to that after the first sentence. Now we're 5 paragraphs in, and I'm like, please kill me.
He means of the monologue, not of the story.
Yes, not of the story. Thank you. Yeah.
Because the beginning of the story was very confusing.
Yes, but had nothing to do with any of that.
Right.
But, and you couldn't have been paying attention to Adeline's story, because there wasn't much. But that was the beginning anyway. But regardless, this monologue just went on for too long, and it just bothered me to no end.
Yeah, it bothered me too, because there are parts of it that are good, and like I said before, poignant stuff, but the way that they're executing it is just poor.
Mm-hmm.
It's just poor. So, I had you write that down, because that's really meaningful, right? That one line or 2 lines where she's like, there's no point in punishing someone whose life has been punishing others and
doing so out of fear is what she says, right?
And really what that means is that they're punishing themselves over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. So you doing it
is irrelevant.
Yeah, it's not helpful to anyone. Yeah.
And so that was good, because it was something that was actually a tangible, something I could grab onto when it came to talking about trauma. The fact that, yes, these people did these things and hurt people. Punishing them for that doesn't fix the problem. how you get better from being that person is learning to have compassion for other people, learning how to have compassion for yourself, learning how to empathize, right? And those are all things that, if you're that kind of person, they're skills that you need to learn, right? And so the way to fix that is to learn those skills, not to, or to figure out a way to actually teach the person those skills, which only is going to work if they want to learn them, right? But punishing them doesn't work, right? I guess just read the quote again so I can just make sure that I've hit everything I wanted to say on it.
You asked what justice looks like here. To tell you the truth, I'm not sure. How do you punish someone who lives their whole life in fear and anger without stoking those flames? I want him to pay for what he's done, but I want him to get better too. I want him to see that there is another way and that we can work together toward a better day.
Right. So, yeah, I think I described that enough.
I think so too.
And it kind of, if you want to take it to a real world comparison, you know, like the prison system versus like rehabilitation kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, correction facilities,
Yeah,
right? But that's not...
But it's not correction at all.
No.
It's just...
punishment.
Yeah, it's punishment, and then, you know, creating more separation, more fear, right? Because as soon as then they're let out of jail, it's that much harder for them to succeed.
And re-assimilate back into society.
Right, and become... better than they were before.
Yeah.
It's a harder starting point to start from than where they started the first time around. But that's neither here nor there.
So the only other thing I wanted to talk about for this particular portion, especially with the Soren thing, is such a weird moment with Soren and Teferi. Soren lets Edgar go, and Teferi looks at Soren and he's like, "You did the right thing." Who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Where did you come from?
What?
Because again, as I've mentioned in these stories, inclusion is super important, and I get that as much as I possibly can. But Teferi did nothing on Innistrad here, except the one story where he was with Ren and Seven, who also did nothing. In these stories. There was one side story with Ren and Seven, and that story was cool, and Teferi did a great thing for Ren and Seven in that side story, and that's it. Otherwise, he was here, and he occasionally did time stuff that other people told you that he was doing.
Right.
And surmised what was going on with him.
Yeah.
How does he have any knowledge of, like, sure, maybe he gets who Edgar is, because Soren mentions, like, hey, my grandfather's missing. I'm going to go get him at Olivia's house. And now the next thing you know, Teferi sees Soren come in, put a knife to, or a sword to Edgar's throat, and then still let him go. Right. Meanwhile, Teferi's like, you did the right thing. And it's like, you don't know the backstory there of the abuse and that it was Edgar who turned Soren into a vampire in the first place and ruined his life against his will as a child, manipulated him, or a teen or whatever. You have no knowledge of that. And Soren calls that out for a half a second, and then he's like, oh, but Teferi's also old.
Who gives a crap?
What?
It was stupid, because it again was very much like, we care about minorities. We promise. Lesbians. Person of color. But do those characters get to do anything of consequence? No.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
So it's like a slap in the face. Because it's like, you obviously don't actually care. Well, you're just pretending like you care. Or
is it another... I'm being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, because I agree with your point wholeheartedly, and I think I've made that clear. But is it just that R&D knows that in printing the cards, right, in printing the planeswalkers, they are showing diversity that way, and then saying to the story team, okay, make Teferi and Kaya have a reason to be here. It's like, but they don't have a reason. Like, Chandra finds a girlfriend. Okay, that's why she's here.
But they also didn't, like, in any way go over how she found a girlfriend. Like, they were just like, she's here now.
But that's my point. All I'm saying is that the cards exist on the cards, like or should say, the characters exist on the cards, completely separate and apart from the story. I mean, we've seen that many times. Look at any and all of our discussions from this set, from Midnight Hunt, from Kaldheim, etc., where we were like, oh, this art does not in any way depict what's going on in the story. Right. I mean, and by in any way, I mean, like, yeah, Sigarda's tied up, but she's not in the same way by any means. Like, it just doesn't make a ton of sense there.
Or Vorinclex is being stabbed by Kaya, yet he just leaves and doesn't get stabbed by Kaya.
So, yeah. I want to... If you are a person of color, or if you are a member of the LGBT community, and you want to say that you disagree with us, I want to know that. Yeah. Very, very much. Because I mentioned it earlier, I am not unaware of the color of my skin, my gender, or my sexual orientation. And so I just happen to be one of the two people sitting here having this discussion. But we always ask for your feedback and your input, etc. And if it's something that you disagree with and you think I'm off base, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to read that and to think about it, and if necessary, to change my mind. Because I'm not sitting here saying, this is 100%, I'm no question I'm right, suck it, everybody else, like...
But we're saying to us, that's what it feels like.
Yes.
And if it feels like that to us, how many more people does it feel like that to?
Sure.
Because even if that's not the intention, you know, even if that's not at all the truth.
Yeah.
You know, even if that's, you know, a complete reach for us to make.
Yeah.
Like, there's still most likely, if we feel that way, there's still most likely some other people who feel like that.
Yeah.
And is that really what you want? When you're doing these stories and
right.
You're including minorities in your stories, is you want some people to feel like it's really disingenuous and like just there for the, like, I don't know, the notoriety of being able to say that they were diverse in the story.
Right. They could point right. They could point it out later on and be like, well, don't forget, Teferi and Kaya were
did it though.
Were in this plane. They were on these stories, and it's like, were they though? Like, if they weren't there, what about your story would have drastically changed? Is it nothing? Then why were they there? Like, yeah. Anyway.
It just feels shitty. Because it's like, okay, sure, it would be great if you hadn't, like, completely fucked up Chandra's relationship with Nissa or her sexual orientation going forward, right? But then they, like, didn't really fix it.
No,
and
they're like...
they were just like, eh.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah, we're sorry, we mean it. Look, here's this meaningful What do you mean that's not a meaningful relationship? We showed them flirting. That's all that anybody wants, right? Hot lesbian flirting. No. Like, the relationship of Nissa and Chandra was never like that, right? It was mutual respect and finding one another and realizing their connection and growing that connection over a long period of time, right? And yet with this, it was like Adeline keeps looking at Chandra and they make funny quips to one another and then they embrace. And we'll get to that at the end. But yeah, so like I said, let us know your thoughts. If you are not a person of color or in the LGBT community, we would still love to hear your opinions.
Yeah.
That's just how that works. We want to know what you think. We wrote down some quotes here. So for Arlen's stuff, Arlen can't think of anything to say. She thinks there isn't anything to say. Sometimes you have to just shut up and appreciate what's happening. Appreciate the absurdity of life itself.
Yeah, I wanted you to write that one down because I feel like my therapist would say that quote is both being grateful and being mindful. And those two things are like the two most important things when it comes to getting over your trauma. So, and if anyone's a fan of Brene Brown or, has Google at their fingertips like we all do.
Or YouTube.
Yeah. That's exactly what Brene Brown would say as well, as a researcher of that exact thing, right? Is that people who are grateful and people who are mindful are much more healthy people than those of us who are not. And, that goes along with what she was saying about Tovalar, which is that she wants him to be better. She wants him to realize that living life the way that he is
and has
it is not I don't want to say that it's wrong, but it's not healthy. It's not the healthiest way to live. And everyone wants the people that they care about to be healthy. And I think that this shows that she cares about him. For better or worse, whatever that means for her, I think it means she cares.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the one part of this that I feel like is in contrast with Soren, because he sits there and says, I don't have to care about my family. I can just do what I have to do and not care that, these people who silently judge because they're dead or whatever.
Well, or now openly judge because they
openly judge.
The ones that
outwardly.
The ones that Olivia / Edgar picked to be at the wedding were the ones that he was most at odds with. He being Soren, in this case, was most at odds with. I wrote down here, this is some last closing things that I still really want to make a point of and I really want some help with from folks, so bear with me, if you will. So first of all, I wrote, this isn't necessarily under that category, but I wrote Chandra and Adeline predictably have their kind of closing moment of their relationship that they formed throughout the course of these stories, however hollow and shitty it might have been. If you're gonna lean into it, then lean into it. Give it something, make it real. And instead, predictably, it's another character noting that they're doing something over there, and okay.
I should stay out of their way.
They're embracing, I should leave them alone. That's their goodbye. I'll say goodbye to Chandra later. But they're saying goodbye right now, and they're embracing.
And I was like, well, this is interesting. I guess they're going to come back to this before the end of the story.
I didn't think that at all.
They did.
No, I didn't think that at all.
Shocker.
I mean, when she said, I'll say goodbye to Chandra later, maybe I thought that we'd hear from Chandra just to say goodbye, but not see Adeline at all, because that would have been Chandra and Adeline's goodbye. But no, Chandra doesn't, we don't see Chandra leave the plane, unlike Kaya and Teferi, right? So, is Chandra still there? Does she stay there? Do we have to wait till we come back to Innistrad to see Chandra again? I highly doubt it. But then if that's the case, do we see Chandra again and have her talk about Adeline to somebody else? Like, if she sees Jace again or Nissa again, does she chat about Adeline with them? Oh, I met this nice woman on Innistrad, and, you know, I go see her whenever I get the chance, along with my mom in Kaladesh or whatever. There was predictably no end to their like closing to their story.
Right.
None whatsoever. It was just another character being like, oh, they're over there. I should leave them alone. This is what I can see them doing from a distance. I'm sure they're having some meaningful conversation about their relationship. And I guess you're supposed to read it into it, but it's been so screwed up that I shouldn't have to read into it. If you want it to be a thing and you want it to be an apology,
then make it a thing.
Yeah. Instead of like half-assing it and being like, well, there's a woman. They make eyes at each other. They make funny comments to one another. They hug each other. Are they in a relationship? Is it just you trying to show like, Chandra's open to women, guys. We didn't mean it when that other person wrote that, you know, decidedly male types, right? So it was a fling. It was an Innistrad fling, and now it's done. But it does mean that in the future, Chandra could be with a woman. It could happen. There's that queer baiting you always asked for. No one asked for it. And in fact, literally asked for the opposite. To please stop doing that. Okay. Here are some questions that I had. This is what I need help with. Here are some questions that I had coming out of this that it is 100% possible that my reading of this is lacking. Like my reading comprehension is poor, or my recollection of some of these things is poor and lacking. And if so, if I'm missing something, you can of course let me know, and or any of you can let me know. And this is not, some YouTubers do this. This is not Joe plays ignorant to try to get comments on the video.
Oh. Ew.
I mean,
that's a thing people do?
It's a subtle thing that people do. People don't do it blatantly, but like, if you mess something up, some people will do things incorrectly on purpose so that they get more comments correcting them, so that they can, like, you know, feed the algorithm and fuel the recommendings, etc. of their videos. That's not what I'm doing here.
I play games, guys.
You can tell.
That's not what we're here for.
You can tell from our viewer numbers, etc. We just ask you all to kindly share it around, and we try to do our best to like make the search functions be the. I do great. Anyway, regardless, that's neither here nor there. I truly have these questions, and if I'm wrong about something or I'm missing something, please let me know, as always. Okay, Teferi takes the Moonsilver Key, and again references its connection to temporal magic, which, as with anything that Teferi does that references anything magic-wise that he's leaving a plane to go do, it's to help him get back his home. Okay, that's fine. But he also warns Arlen of issues with the Phyrexians. What am I missing? Where has he been alerted to current issues with the Phyrexians? When did that happen? Are we to assume that Kaya has told him about Vorinclex? Does Kaya know more about Vorinclex than we are even aware?
He sped up time, saw the future, knows that the Phyrexians are coming, and so now he's telling Arlen. Because
his past relationship with the Phyrexians is obvious. That's not a question in my head. I'm not completely inept and unaware. What I'm curious about is this modern iteration of Phyrexians that has been occurring over the past 3+ sets. Right? Within the last year or two, we've been getting little hints here and there of Phyrexian activity. Why does Teferi know about it? How does Teferi know about it? We're not, like, the Brothers' War is a set that's coming up soon, and that's a flashback set, but that's a way back flashback set. So I'm not anticipating a flashback set where we get the answers to those questions. So at some point, if they ever answer it at all, I'm assuming it will just be some monologue-y thing of like, well, I spoke to so-and-so, and they told me this and this and this, and here's all the evidence that we've gathered, and that's how I know about the Phyrexians. There's the info dump for you. And it's like, okay, I suppose you've warned Arlen about Phyrexians, so if she's ever anywhere, especially on Innistrad, of course, but if she's ever anywhere and sees metal people or oil, like, she'll kind of get it. That bothered me.
Oil is everywhere.
Right. How does he know about any of this? That's what I wanted to know first and foremost. Again, he's a member of the Gatewatch. Kai's a member of the Gatewatch. Maybe they discussed it because they were both on the same plane. I wouldn't know because they each only had about 5 lines in either of these, or in any of these, like, 10 stories that they were in.
Right.
That wasn't the side story with Ren and Seven. Okay.
Yeah, it's really looking like they wanted us to infer a lot of things here instead of telling us anything real.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they did tell us stuff, it was stuff that they shouldn't have been telling us the way that they were telling us.
And then I went back and I looked at this because I was very confused. So between this story, story number 5, episode 5, and the previous story, episode 4, I have questions. Episode 4 ends with Arlen saying, it says she falls, right? Because the falling thing was a lot in that story. Soren fell, Arlen fell, etc.
We all fell.
They all fall down. Arlen...
We didn't fall in love with the stories.
Arlen gets, like, staked by Olivia's hand, right? That's the line that's used, is that a vampire's stiffened hand is much like a stake. And Olivia essentially stabs Arlen, and Arlen falls. Then we get this story. And the first time we see Arlen, she's like dazed and unclear as to what's happening, and she wakes up, and the first person she sees is Tovalar. But then she notices that Boulder and Patience are there as well. 2 of her 4 packmates. Later on, she even specifies the 3 of them, which I assumed to mean Boulder, Patience, Arlen. But then later on, when they're riding in, like, the stagecoach or whatever, like when they're traveling on the road, Arlen mentions looking in and seeing, like, Chandra sleeping on one bench, Teferi sleeping on another, Kaya's, like, sleeping against the wall, and then in the middle are all of her wolves. So is it all of them? Where's Streak and Redtooth? Do we hear about them at all? Because when she wakes up and Tovalar's there, it's only Boulder and Patience. They specify Boulder and Patience, and then Arlen specifies the 3 of them. So even if she's not referring to herself and she's not referring to Tovalar, that's still only 3 out of 4. Because there's Boulder, Patience, Streak, and Redtooth. Maybe I'm forgetting. Did Streak and Redtooth, like, even leave Tovalar as well? And I'm just forgetting that from an earlier story? Like I said,
didn't they mention
definitely possible.
Redtooth was probably close behind or something?
In this story...
Or that was Boulder?
In this story, that was her, like, dream sequence. Where she's, like, dreaming, and Boulder's there, and Patience is there, and she sees Streak up ahead, and she has to imagine that Redtooth is behind.
Okay.
That was a dream sequence in this story.
Okay.
So...
Still.
and secondly, right, because that was kind of important to me, they made a big deal out of her pack. It was very emotional. We enjoyed the emotional aspect of it, right? It made us feel things, and we appreciated that. But then, why not close that story arc? Why? Why would you not, like, it just, or at least make it clearer? I like, again, if I am forgetting that Streak and Redtooth, I'm so sorry to keep interrupting you. That if I am forgetting that Streak and Redtooth went off somewhere because I believe they are partners, then that's fine. Then I forgot, and that's why I'm asking for a little bit of help. Then that would be acceptable. Then at least she's with Boulder and Patience. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna make a joke and say that arcs are only arcs if they're not circles.
Mm-hmm. If they don't actually come back around? I like it. And then the second thing I wanted to know about that particular situation is, again, Arlen wakes up and sees Tovalar and Boulder and Patience. What possible motivation does Olivia Voldaren have for not killing Arlen Cord?
What possible motivation does Tovalar have for showing up at all?
He said she asked for help, and that's why he showed up. That was his excuse. Again, Arlen mentions later on, I think as a further method of answering your question, Arlen mentions later on that Eternal Night and Olivia, like the Voldarens and the Markovs coming together and creating a vampiric ruling class would also be bad for the werewolves.
Yes.
So that makes a bit of sense. I wasn't as offended by that.
I didn't care about that.
He cares about being able to hunt and kill people, and if he is instead going to be hunted and killed instead...
Fair.
That's the way I looked at it. If other people had issues with it like Amy did, definitely, as always, comments down below. That's what it's all for. I was not as upset by that. I think because there were so many other glaring things, but I don't think that... It's not like, wow, Amy, come on. Like, I think that, that's a fair question to ask. I'm just telling you how I interpreted it, with my thought process. Why doesn't Olivia kill her? Why? She was clearly unconscious from blood loss, from shock, from whatever the situation may be. Olivia is a vampire. Rip her head off. Cut her apart. They were alone together. Arlen doesn't help you in any way if she's alive. And it doesn't hurt you in any meaningful way if you kill her. It's not like there's going to be people showing up with more of a vendetta. Like, maybe the other planeswalkers, but like Olivia doesn't really know that they're there. She's preoccupied with other stuff.
The wedding.
Yeah, well, the messed up wedding at that point. But it's like, it's not necessarily like Sigarda's going to want to kill you more, because she already definitely wants to kill you.
Yeah.
So you have very powerful enemies. So it's not that it can't be that you're afraid of making powerful enemies by killing Arlen, because again, at that point, if you're very aware of what's going on with Arlen, you would even be aware of the fact that she, at that point, didn't even have her pack. They just weren't around. So I was baffled. Why? I mean, from a story perspective, I get why they wanted to keep her alive. That makes sense. What I don't, like, the authors want to keep her alive. Why would Olivia as a character keep her alive? It makes no sense. Yeah. Like, you jab her in the back, she gets woozy and falls. Olivia's gonna go, well, she's dead, and walk away? Really? You don't, like, jab her in the throat?
Maybe she's just not gonna give a damn?
Except that it was a big deal for Olivia and Arlen to be squaring off with each other at the end of episode 4.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't just like, oh, who are you? Okay, I'll fight you. No, Olivia was talking to Arlen and saying, like, you're a problem, you're a pain in the ass. It's like, okay, if you think that she's a pain in the ass, maybe do something about it. Maybe don't just injure her and then leave.
Well, the wedding was already ruined by then, so...
Exactly.
She just didn't care.
Oh, I was going to say, that if the wedding's already ruined, it's not that you're worried about getting blood on your dress. Like,
Well,
like...
It would have went well with the dress.
Yeah. It's just, again, the end of story 4 ends with Arlen gets jabbed in the back and then she falls. That's a cliffhanger. Yeah. You want to know what happens next. Think about if you were watching this in a movie or a television show and an episode ends and somebody gets jabbed in the back, they get woozy and they fall. And they are alone with the villain. And then the next episode they just wake up and somebody else is there, but that somebody else didn't just chase her off. Like, it's
weird.
It bothered me to no end. Like, why? What's the motivation for not killing her? I feel like I'm just repeating myself.
It was yet another moment where they, like, chopped the middle out. It was like the climax happened at the end of the last story, even though it felt like they were building up to more of a climax. So when this story began, I thought it was going to be like the rest of the climax, which was going to be awesome then, right? And then the falling action, right? And the resolution. But what we got was anticlimax and then a resolution without any falling action.
Right. And even then we didn't really get a resolution because I talked about all the
Right.
plot threads that did not get tied up.
Yeah.
And that I just don't see how they're going to get tied up.
Nope. So maybe it's just like a falling action. They were falling.
Yeah. They all fell. That was at the end of episode 4.
And Soren, they fell.
Okay. So anyway, that's the end of our review. I didn't like this story.
Agreed, it was bad.
Yeah. Like, again, it's at least you're consistent that the second story on Innistrad in your block ends with a bad story because you cannot finish them, apparently. You just can't do it. The Eldritch Moon one was bad, and this one was bad, so congrats on consistency, I guess. Like, I want to make it clear for folks that may have not watched JaARs before this one or before the Crimson Vow ones in general. I don't take pleasure in like shitting on these stories.
Oh, but it's so hard not to sometimes.
It's just, I just get very frustrated. Because I have seen the potential that they have to be very, very, very good. Very good.
Yeah, and it just makes ones like these very depressing.
You know, the year that we read that Eldritch Moon story, that finale, it was one of our bottom 3 of the year. But that's when we would do top 5, bottom 3 videos. We didn't do that last year, and it wasn't for lack of like time or availability. It was because
we didn't have good ones to work with.
That's not 100% fair. There were good stories. There were not stories where I was like, wow, I loved this one. There were a couple, but that would be like doing a top 1 or a top 2. You know, like it didn't feel like, it doesn't feel like yet it is appropriate to do a top 5 list because these stories I still feel have consistent enough issues where I'm not okay with just being like, oh yeah, let's make a top 5 list. Like, again, as we talked about earlier, right? Top 5 lists probably do quite well on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
And it would be nice, but I'd like to actually believe in the top 5 list that I'm making. Mm-hmm. You know? I guess I could do a bottom 5 list because, again, top whatever or lists do well and negativity does well. The professor has talked about that a lot, where like a video where he like craps on a product or something does a hell of a lot better than one where he's positive about it. Wow. But I just don't want to do that. Like, why would I want to make a video where I'm like, here were the shittiest stories of the year? It's like, that's not, I don't want to encourage that. Right. You know, make good stories and we'll make a top 5. Like, that's all. Yeah. That's all there is to it. You know, go check out our top 5 videos from the past. I'm not even going to link them up top. Like, you can search, you know, JaAR, JaAR, top 5 or whatever, and you'll see, I think we've done 2 or 3 of them. You know, I enjoyed doing those. Yeah. We, in fact, had, like, debates on, like, which ones we had to cut from the list. Right. You know, maybe we even like, did a top 10.
About the order and stuff.
Yeah, I think we did a top 10 one year as well. Yeah. So, like, you know, whatever.
Because there were so many good ones. Yeah. Those were the days.
Let's be positive for a moment.
Yes.
And say that we will be back next week with some Kanagawa Neon Dynasty stories.
Ooh.
It's going to be very interesting. I'm curious how they're going to work this because I know that the first story/stories that they put up Still not on the story page, by the way, at the time of recording. And they've been up for... I'm trying to look at my calendar on the wall over there. 3 weeks? 5 weeks? Something like that. It's somewhere in that range. I think they were put up like December 15th or some nonsense like that. And, you know, now it's like almost mid-January or mid-January. So it's been a month. And if you go to the story page, it's very prominently displayed Crimson Vow, which is good for us. We're making these videos. Right. But we're done now, and we're super late on them. So why aren't the Kamigawa stories up there? It even says on the article that it was released under story. It's not. It's definitely not there. Just update your website. You have to pay people to do that. Like, the company has to pay people to do that, to update the website. Like, they have to do it. I can't imagine that they don't. Anyway, we will be back. Yes. We will be back next week with more of these stories because there are more stories to review. So why wouldn't we? Thank you so very much for being here and joining us for any and all of these Innistrad Crimson Vow stories that you did, any of the Midnight Hunt ones that you did, any of them that you did. We appreciate it, and we would love, as always, for your feedback in the comments. I've said it a million times. I'll say it a million more, because analyzing these stories and saying how we think they could be better, or at least calling out situations where they're lacking, I still truly think is a great way for you to help join us as we show off our...
#Vorthos Pride.
I did a weird... the hand thing.
It's okay.
It's been a long night. So thank you all so very much for being here. We really appreciate it. I forgot to mention it earlier, and I put this here on purpose. If you have not been watching our Monday videos on this channel, we've been reviewing the Varia decks. We've done this for all of the Varia products that exist. We have some all over here. I'm not going to be able to do it. But anyway, so definitely, there we go, I did it. Definitely make sure to tune in on Mondays, where you will see our reviews of these new decks for Season 2 from their Kickstarter. We've been having a blast. You just did this Moonlight Cleric. We really enjoyed the Phoenix Spellsword as well. What one will we do next? We have 4 more to go for the next 4 weeks. So again, do not forget to subscribe and ring that bell so that you make sure that you get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, whenever we go live, Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on this channel. Video Games for All, gluten-free for all, link down in the description box below. And thank you all so very much for being here. Thank you for liking and sharing as well. And so, for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I have been Joe.
And I'm Mimi.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.